Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 83. Today's guest is Anthony Tao, who is here from Beijing on the line. He'll be joining us in just a minute. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and have nothing to do with any other organizations, even if they call themselves Rattle. We're not them. We're Rattle, the Rattle Foundation. And we just do this because we love poetry. I know you love poetry because you're here, and I appreciate that. So please do click the like button and share and subscribe. No matter where you're listening to this, it's still actually on Twitter through Periscope, which I was told was going to be canceled March 1st, but that's still going on. If you're watching on Twitter or Periscope, please make sure to find a new way to watch, because at some point they are getting rid of that live streaming service. But for now, it's there. And so make sure you like us there, wherever you're watching this, especially YouTube. YouTube is really nice. If you're watching this after the fact, too, give us some reviews on iTunes or whatever you're listening to. Now, as I mentioned, today's guest is Anthony Tao, and he is joining us from Beijing, so it's the morning for him. And he is the author of Coronavirus in China, which was one of the first poems we published about the coronavirus over a year ago. I loved it so much, we nominated it for a Pushcart Prize. Thought it was one of the best poems we published in all of last year. But it turns out Anthony's also a really interesting guy. He works for a magazine called SupChina, an online media company, sort of teaching English readers about what's going on in China, which is really cool. He also has a music band, Poetry X Music, that does music combined with poetry. And here he is, Anthony Tao. Hello, Anthony. How are you doing tonight?
Hello. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. So glad you could join us. It's just amazing to me every time that we have someone from the other side of the world, and the connection is so clear and the sound is so good. So I'm so glad you could be here.
Yeah, I'm really, really honored to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. And yes, all these video meeting software companies probably have had to tweak their products a lot in the last year. I hope they get it right.
Well, it works. I just can't, I'm imagining, the photons bouncing off satellites coming all the way around the world, and there's no latency at all. It's really cool. But do you want to start us out?
Knock on wood.
Yeah. Do you want to start us out with a poem?
I shall indeed. So I have a poem here called Beihai Park at Sunrise. Beihai translates literally to North Sea. And it's one of the many parks out here in, China has a lot of parks. Beijing also does. And it used to be one of my favorite places to hang out. And Beihai is notable because of its proximity to the Forbidden City. And it was created by emperors hundreds of years ago. There's this big man-made lake, and that lake is the quote-unquote sea in this North Sea Park at Sunrise. And I think what's best about it is are the people. And if you go in the morning, especially, you'll find a lot of elderly folks whose stories are riveting for how much they've lived through. Anyway, Beihai Park at Sunrise. At dawn, face lines gild the lived. Can you say what shaped them? Rice wine imbibed over tiger slaughter, the east sun, pelican shade for Beijing rain, or slow-moving despair. Blinking in the mist of morning, they slide against the soundtrack of history, friction and fog lifting like heat off Kong, or last rites for ancestors who outlived revolution. Frame with your iPhone, but you'll never know what moves them, what death carts for the starved, sins stained in red armbands, auguries foretold of regret or gods, so forget asking. Here in this park, they dance to synchronize frantic and fragile heartbeats. Even yours, if you dare take their ribbon and swing it to unfurl mountains in this prosperous air.
Yeah, so it's a very luxurious style of poem that you write. Caitlin Buxbaum already pointed out the friction and fog, the soundtrack of history. Some great lines here in this poem. Just to start out, do you want to tell us a little bit just about how you came to be in China? You grew up in Kansas. And what brought you out there?
That's right. So the story of what brought me back, as it were, begins a little bit earlier than that. So I was born in Beijing. Most of my family is from Beijing. And my parents left when I was 2 and 3. My dad first, and then my mom. They were part of this wave of immigrants that left China in the mid '80s to pursue higher education in the U.S. And so anyway, they ended up in Kansas because the University of Kansas happened to be one of the only places that gave both of them a full scholarship, just to study econ. And they both planned to come back. My dad had a very cushy government post position. In fact, they were both graduates of Peking University, famous class of '77, which was the first class to start school after a 10-year moratorium after the Cultural Revolution. But it so happens that in '89, Tiananmen happened, the Tiananmen protests, of course, and then that made them lose hope in China. And so as a result, instead of them coming back to me, I was sent over there. So that was in 1990. I was 5.5, and that's how I ended up in Kansas. And I came back in 2008 to cover the Olympics. Back at that time, I was an intern at ESPN, the magazine. I'm sorry, you hear that cat in the background?
Yeah, we see him too.
Oh, you do? Yeah. Apologies for that.
No, everyone loves a cat. Don't worry.
Okay. There's another one rustling plastic over there. Apologies. In 2008, I was interning at ESPN, the magazine in New York, and the Olympics were happening. And I'm not sure why, but I guess I kind of know why. But it just sort of called to me. That event, the global significance of it, it just sort of seemed like I needed to be there. And after the games were over, I did briefly go back to New York, but I just thought, it was a little bit more exciting. I thought I could do a little bit more than just sports reporting. And so I went back to Beijing. Landed, in fact, on the day of Obama's inauguration in 2009. I remember it very well, just going straight from the airport to a bar to watch that. And never left, even though a lot has changed, both for me and the city in that time.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about SupChina, where you're the managing editor, and just tell us a little bit about what that does. I was reading a bunch of articles last night from there, and really interesting stuff, and really important stuff too, because we don't, like the mission statement says, we don't really get accurate news from China in the rest of the Western world, really. So how did you get the job there, and what's the mission of SupChina?
Yeah, so the company is about 5 or 6 years old. I've been there, I think, for the last 3 years, give or take, and we have a small staff. It's a really just a boutique media company, and it's online only. But all the people involved sort of are very experienced. I don't want to use the term China watchers, but I guess a lot of us are just people that have made a career following China news. Anyway, our editorial staff is very small. It's only 6, but then we have a business development side that does events and such. It's led by a couple of names that everybody in the China watching circle will all recognize. So our editor-in-chief is Jeremy Goldkorn. And then our senior editor, who also runs the Sinica podcast network, is Kaiser Guo. And they're both I guess Jeremy is a naturalized American now. He was born in South Africa, but they both lived in China, in Beijing, for 20 plus years, and I got to know them when they were out here. They went back to the U.S. about 3 or 4 years ago, and then they reached out one day and asked, "Hey, are you doing anything?" And it so happened that I had just resigned from my previous job a month earlier when Jeremy reached out, and so they pulled me on board. And it's the mission is sort of to tell the China story, and that includes, it includes all the warts, of course, all of the it includes all the bad, and then also some of the good. We try to but we try to present more society stories and culture stories, and the day-to-day that help people understand not just not just what the government is doing, but also what the people want. And that's very hard. And that is, I think, really important, especially in this day and age, especially in the present day when there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding, and that's affecting both Chinese people in the U.S. and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. And that warts and all that you mentioned, do you get any pushback from the Chinese government over that? The mission statement of SupChina talks a little bit about censorship and things, and I was wondering too, even back a year ago, it was February we published that poem, and it's not, the warts are there too. In I think the fourth section of that is sort of all warts. And I was wondering, is there any, from the American perspective, there's a lot of censorship in China, but I haven't really, reading articles and getting poems from there, I don't really see a lot of it. So it's always a sort of a disconnect. I don't know how much it really is, or how much. Do you think about that at all as you publish articles and poems, or is it not something that you worry about?
So censorship is a big topic. I personally, I don't think about that. That's not on my mind as I'm working. A few reasons. One, because my work is in English, and I just don't think they care that much about English language works of any kind. They really only pay attention once it begins circulating domestically. Occasionally it happens, but SupChina is blocked. The website is blocked. We've been blocked for the last couple years.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it happened. It happened just before the anniversary of Tiananmen a couple years ago. So June 2nd or 3rd is when it actually got blocked. It was actually a relief, and in a sense, it was a compliment, because in China you're not allowed to be too real, especially with news reporting. You have to toe the party line. Censorship works in a I don't know how familiar Americans are with the system here, but it relies on self-censorship. The government really puts the onus on the publications themselves. It's basically, if you cross the line, they'll let you know about it. If you cross the line 3 times, they'll take away your ability to do that business, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, we didn't get a warning. We have no idea who to contact about that. They just blocked us right away, which is fine. The New York Times is blocked. BBC now. A lot of good publications are. But censorship is something that local writers, creators, artists, musicians grapple with all the time, and it's very complicated. In a sense, a lot of them have figured it out. They know what they can write about. They know the line. The bold ones walk right up to it, and then some of them cross it, of course. I think it's unfortunate that because of the system in place, it seems like a lot of the Chinese authors who do get attention, who get platformed in the West, only do so because they are quote unquote banned, or because their material is considered sensitive, right? I think there's a lot of good writers that we do never hear about.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too, because there's so much actual narrative control here in the United States too, but it's just done a different way, and that people are sort of marginalized and distanced and not given platforms and sort of mocked and things. I was just reading a poem by Peter Dale Scott, who is a poet who wrote a lot of extremely political work, and he invented the phrase deep state and things like that. And he's, a Berkeley professor, attacks the government his entire life. He's like 92 years old, and just most people don't know who he is, And it's because he doesn't get any attention or publicity, really. And I wonder if it's it seems like people in the United States are not really aware of the way censorship works here. Are people in China aware of it? And does that make them more sort of harder to censor in a weird way? That's just something I've always wondered about.
If you asked me this question 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have said yes. Perhaps they know the workarounds, right? There's a Chinese saying, it's millennia old, that that top heaven has their policies, but the bottom, the people, have their workarounds. And it's this cat and mouse game has been going on for centuries, for 2,000, 3,000, Chinese would say 5,000 years. As far as but the situation has changed, I think, for the worse, dramatically and very noticeably in the last 5 years. They have really tightened the screws on the censorship apparatus to the point that it is incredibly hard. It is really, really hard to get anything out there. Back 5 years ago, or give or take, all of these new social media platforms were coming up. You might have heard of Weibo, which is kind of like Chinese Twitter, but it's a little bit more dynamic. You get more characters and all of that. Anyway, Weibo seemed to be a game changer when it first appeared, because that was a space where people could discuss things. It was where they could sort of have dialogue and kind of expect that censors wouldn't get around to it, or that basically the human censors wouldn't get around to it. But since then, these technology companies have developed algorithms at the behest of the government, so that if you just mention certain keywords, no one will ever see your message. You might have heard just a couple weeks ago, Clubhouse was blocked. Clubhouse Clubhouse lived for about in China. It was popular for about a week or two max, and then there was a room that was created called "Are there concentration camps in Xinjiang?" And it was a monumental room in many ways. There were 4,000 people in that room listening to people discuss this question, and a lot of the moderators were Uyghurs and Kazakhs who shared their experience, and as a result, a lot of Han Chinese got to commiserate and express their sympathy, and it was wonderful. And that happened on a Saturday. On Monday, the app was locked.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe it was even the day after, right? All I can say is we're trying. We try to find ways. I used to work for a bookstore here called The Bookworm. Iconic space. It was a nexus of intellectual life for both locals and foreigners. It was around for about 12 years. And it shut down in November of 2019 for different reasons. It wasn't as if the government told them they had to shut down, but they certainly didn't offer them any help. And I remember during the literary festivals that we hosted, we did feel authorities were watching us closer and closer. In the end, one of the last festivals that we held, our boss was asked to go to this police station 2 hours outside of the city. It wasn't detention or anything. They just said, "Hey, we need to see your papers. Come to this location at this time." As he went there, and they made him wait for a few hours, took his whole day, paid a fire code violation fine, and then we sort of all know why. But stuff like that.
Yeah. Richard Westheimer.
It's not uncommon.
Yeah. Richard Westheimer asks if your poetry is censored in China too. Is that blocked too? Like if people went to read your poem "Coronavirus in China" at rattle.com, would that be blocked, or is your website blocked?
No. And that's only because my website, my personal website, so just anthonytao.com. It's all in English, and it's not. It's not hosted in China. Mm-hmm. If I tried to create a microblog on, Sina Weibo or whatever, I don't think it would last very long. I don't know. It might. Again, there's no Chinese on it, so it's possible that they haven't put those English words in the system, in the algorithm, right? That's possible. WeChat is another matter altogether. They do filter English words on WeChat's publishing platform, but yeah, so my website's not blocked, just not big enough, and Rattle is not blocked. I can say, yeah.
Well, let's do some more poems. Do you want to read? I think "Foo Dog" is the next one you had.
Yes. So, "Foo Dog," sort of on the same theme of just, I guess it's an expression of my admiration of the older generation here. I have a bunch of poems for whatever reason that sort of tried to tried to see things through some of the older Chinese. And it's this idea that they've experienced so much, wars and, of course, the Cultural Revolution, and then the reform and opening that turned everything upside down. A lot of people actually still have nostalgia for the era, for the Mao era, for the height of the Mao era, because everyone was sort of in it together. They were all poor together. They were struggling together. The ones that weren't starving, that is, and everyone was kind. There was no corruption. I overheard someone at the post office the other day sort of rant about people these days, and sorry, not at the post office. I think at the bank, and I got the sense that he was swindled. The poor guy in his 60s or something. Anyway, there's also this idea in some of my poems that these people have experienced so much, and they all sort of know what they went through. That even if you asked them, even if you wanted them to tell you, you wouldn't really exactly understand. So I do try to write from their perspective, but also it's very clear that I'm an outsider. Anyway, food dog. Chinese our age have lived 3 lives, like stages of a storm. Temper and fury before water and clemency, forgiveness. We dug and scrubbed with dirt for the privilege of claiming the yellow earth of our nation, carving our name according to the oracle. We washed memories with the faces of children who have flown to corners of their remarkable futures, leaving us Pekingese, Shih Tzu, Poodle, dogs of fortune, companions till death. Then there are the others, those amongst us, sensitive and bold, who still nurse an unflappable sense of duty, conviction in the future, which is to say, in themselves. They walk the marble-eyed retriever, golden as spring sun.
Excellent. That was Foo Dog. We talked about the censorship stuff in China, but maybe we should mention, because a few people have asked, sort of referenced already, that you're doing events, and so you host an open mic there, and is it monthly? A monthly open mic?
That's right. Yeah,
yes, but most of our viewers, will be shocked to know that it's been live since like May or April last year or something, right?
Right. Yes. Yes, we've had a different experience with coronavirus. Obviously, it began here, and we got it really early. We were all sort of self-quarantining. People naturally did it. I think they still remembered what SARS was like back, only 17 years ago, as it were, 16 years ago. And so for the months of February in Beijing, first it was Wuhan, and then in Beijing, in February, everybody just stayed inside. And it wasn't a hard lockdown. Some residential compounds did institute that, but I, for instance, could still go out to the grocery store, and there were a couple cafes that stayed open that entire time. And then by March, people were out in the parks. By April and May, things were back normal. And yeah, we were hosting events again, live events. So this poetry event, it's called Spittoon. It was founded 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, by a British guy named Matthew Byrne. He left to go back to Congleton, England, last June. But Spittoon has been going on. It's had a poetry night every single month for 5 years. When Matt left, I took over as the host. But Spittoon also does a monthly fiction night and a monthly storytelling night. We have a book club. It has now there's nonfiction, and is
it all in English, or is it bilingual?
It's mostly English. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most of the events are English. We do have a magazine as well, a quarterly. Now it's more of a biannual. But that one, we only take submissions from Chinese, from local authors, and then we translate it to English. So it's a bilingual magazine. That's been going on for a few years. Simon Shea is the editor-in-chief of that. Simon and Shelley. I don't know if they're in the chat here, but yeah, it's a literary and arts collective. I guess is the best way to describe
that's
it.
really cool. And how big is like the audience for poetry in English in China? I wanted to ask about poetry in Chinese as well. You know, I'm always just curious about what the world, the poetry world is like in other countries. So is there a big audience in Beijing for English language poetry, first of all? And then what's the poetry situation like in China, just in general, in Chinese?
Yeah, the scene is okay. The foreigner community has been dwindling for the last, I don't know. We like to say the Great Exodus really began about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's been getting noticeably smaller. And of course, COVID took a huge chunk of people away. But funny enough, the attendance at the poetry nights since for maybe the last year, basically since we came back from COVID, has been very healthy. We've had, our room's not small. It has maybe 30 seats or so, and then a small standing room, a space for people to stand, but it's been packed every single time. I'm not really sure why.
That's interesting, because if you went to a poetry reading here, you probably wouldn't get a crowd that big.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been to an open mic in the U.S. in so long. I can't remember the last one I went to, actually. What did I want to say? I do notice that in our audience there are more local faces. Chinese people, and obviously a lot of them speak English very well, or at least they can understand, right? And we've always tried to promote a bilingual aspect of it. We don't do it now as much as a regular feature, but back then we always tried to get a poem read in translation, or a poem read first in a different language, and then someone else would read it in English. Sometimes it would be Chinese, and sometimes be a different language. For the community, for the foreign community, I think it's relatively healthy. It's still small though, in absolute terms. As far as the local poetry scene, poetry is an exalted art here in China. That the country has a very proud tradition of it. School kids memorize poems when they're in kindergarten, starting from kindergarten, first grade. All of these classics from the Song Dynasty and the Tang Dynasty. And back then, they really were, a lot of them were just songs, right? And so people hold it in reverence. But a lot of the poetry that's being written now are online poems. There's a specific term for it, and I'm not sure how it's translated, but basically, I think the poets that you might hear about are that you might have heard about in the news are migrant workers who write poetry, right? And I know a lot of your guests in just the past month have talked about the purpose of poetry and how it's a tool. It's something that can contain our feelings, our emotions. It's something that it's vital to expression, to who we are. It can be a way for us to express what we normally otherwise can't. I try to picture what it's like to work at Foxconn, for instance, just on the assembly line and doing these rote mechanical actions, performing that for 8 hours a day, sometimes more, at the assembly line. What can you do to reclaim a part of your sense of human? Poetry. That's the answer. But I think the scene. I think in China people grapple with a lot of the same issues that they do in the U.S., which is what is the purpose? What is academic poetry these days? How do you reconcile the fact that a lot of what is popular isn't recognizable. It isn't isn't recognized, I should say, by the people in charge. There are all these very official writers associations here. In the same way, I think they sort of.
Yeah, where would they be published? Are there poems published in newspapers? Are there literary magazines? How does it?
There are. The status of lit mags here is comparable to the status of lit mags in the U.S. So there aren't that many that are really big. I don't know. In fact, I should check. What is the rattle of China? What I will say, the scene in the U.S. seems healthier in that there are many more publications. There are many more lit mags. I think there are many more people who are enthusiastic about being in this, despite the pay or lack thereof. Just doing it out of passion. I don't know a lot of people here that have that time, energy to create these platforms. But lit mags, there are some, but most of it is just online. There are these huge websites with text all over. You go on the front page and you're bombarded with text and you don't really know where to look. But just a matter of scale, you have something like that, even though everything is sort of minimized, because there's so many people here that you can still get a few thousand, 10,000 views on your stuff if as long as it's just on that front page. Right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't want to. This is all interesting to talk about, but I want to keep on your poems. Do you want to? Next up, we were going to do, I think, In the Air, which is a video that you made, a music video for part of coronavirus in China, and I think you might have frozen. Oh, there you are. So. Do you want to just explain a little bit about what that was? One of the things that was interesting when I looked more into you after we published that poem, that you do this poetry X music with Liane Halton. And can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing with that, and how did the band come together, and what it is that you're doing first of all, and then we'll play this video.
Right. So this collaboration started a couple years ago. One of the stages from Spittoon actually is something called Spit Tunes. Where Matt was also a drummer, and so he wanted to give poets here a bigger stage, and so he puts them with musicians, and then we do a show. And the format normally is the musician gets 10 minutes, the poet gets 10 minutes, and then you come together for a 10-minute piece that you've worked on together. But Liane and I, anyways, I was introduced to Liane Halton, who is a classical guitarist. She plays the classical guitar, and we found pretty early that the themes of our works sort of layered very well, and that there were spots where if you played my poetry with her music, just played together, it seems like they would weave in and out. It was like a braid, Sometimes the words would come out on top, and sometimes the music, and so we just decided to do a set where we just put everything together. And that's how it began. In the photo I saw that you used the cover for The Last Tribe on Earth, which is our first album actually.
Oh, is it? Okay.
And then we worked on the second one, based off the poems that were published in Rattle, the coronavirus series. And I think the video that you're about to play is a music video that a friend of ours, Nina DeLenz, made for us from one of those tracks. Called In the Air. Our footage from Beijing during that time.
Yeah, very cool. Well, let me. I'll set this up and we'll play it right now. Let's see. It might take a second though to get everything aligned.
No problem. And the band was relatively recent. At the start it was just Liane and myself, and then we added a bassist and a drummer and a jazz pianist.
Good. Well, it's good to go. You're not going to be able to hear this, so it's just going to be silent for 2 minutes until it's over. But everyone else at home will be listening and watching.
Okay, I'll sit back.
Masks. Wearing them, we were more aware of the other. our eyes locked more often, for longer, searching for provocation, gauging interest down to conjunctiva. We experimented with sounds, soughing and snuffling, and remembered the lessons our cats and dogs had taught. Ears back, head tilted. We were polite to those we did not care for, widening our expressions, softening our brows to say we understand the feeling. But occasionally, next to a body we leaned toward, we grimaced with yearning, with agony and despair that we could not rip off these masks and laugh at our poor nerves aflutter. Our gazes settled on cloud shadow and withy, old tiles on rooftops, and dragon wings rippling the pale blue. We saw the ways we merge with the world, with the air, taking into our lungs the trees, the purslane in pavement, the rewards for being who we are. Magic, we said to ourselves, forgetting what we were afraid of.
And that was In the Air, poem by Anthony Tao, music by Liane Halton. I can't keep up with the credits, but everybody can find this at Poetry X Music. So go subscribe and like this video. That's just amazing, Anthony. I loved every element of that. It's just so cool, from the music and the video itself and the way it works together with the poem. How do you go about combining music and poetry, and how do you think that they're related? Like, what do you think? One thing that I sort of love about poems is that they're so removed from everything else, that they're so pure, and it's just the words on the page and sort of you. But then when you add music, it sort of adds totally different elements. So how do you think about how music and poetry fits together, and how do you work these things to make songs out of poems?
Actually, last month, Dana Jola, did you know he's also done poetry with music?
Yeah, I have. There's a whole, we were thinking about doing a music poetry issue. We did a slam issue like 12 or 15 years ago with a CD in the back. And we were thinking about doing something similar, maybe with MP3s or something with them, music and poetry together. But yeah, and a whole bunch of people do it. And it's interesting. It's a fusion though. Like there's a different way that it's functioning, I think. Speaking of like the use of poetry. Yeah.
Well, also what Dana does, he, of course, he has his poems sung by a professional singer. And I've always said, if I could sing, I would just do that. I would write songs instead of poems, perhaps. But, poetry at the very beginning was just song, right? I think it lends itself very well to music. And it's in different styles. Well, I should say different styles of poetry lend itself to different types of music. And it just so happens that mine, the rhythm that I use, happens to line up very well with Leanne's classical guitar. I think that was just very serendipitous that it happened that way. I think also just through the process, I got a much keener sense of how poetry should sound. I was never somebody who paid much attention to the sound of the voice, of the presentation while I was up there reading. And in fact, like most people, I hated the sound of my voice for a very long time. And then just throughout the process, you kind of figure out exactly the music really makes you pay attention to rhythm and where the beats should fall and how it can sort of fit together, you know. And now when I'm writing the whole exercise, in fact, has been incredibly useful for the writing process because I sort of have this beat in my head, and you have a much clearer sense of where I should put words and maybe where I should put a pause, where the line should break, all of that. But you know, when we put these things together, when we put the songs and the poems together, we also pay attention to places where the words and the music can sort of latch onto one another. And again, in some places, we kind of want the music to lead. And in other places, Liane is sort of listening for specific words to know, this is where I need to be here and there. It's a bit different with the band because it's a little bit more rigid. The other musicians have to count. They can't really rely on listening. And that has been quite the experience as well.
What do you want to do next? Do you want to do Christmas alla Romana?
Well, so Christmas alla Romana. So yeah, the recording I sent you is the recording with the full band. Actually, I'm thinking maybe we can leave that for the end.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Maybe as an outro or something like that.
Yeah, you know what? I'll play that as I'm getting stuff ready for the open mic, which I should say two things. I've sort of been so engrossed in talking to you about stuff that I forgot to say. There's an open mic the second hour of the show, so if anybody would like to participate, please do. How it works is you send a poem to openmic@rattle.com right now, so I have it to put on screen. Then you can call in. I'll put up the numbers later. But in the transition, let's do that. That's a great idea. I'll play that in the transition. So what do you want to do next instead? Do you want to do Anja Prepares to Play?
Yeah, let's do that one. This one is is purely a poem. It was written a few years back, actually. It hasn't been published yet, but it was something that I went back to after I began working with Liane, and I edited it so that it became a little bit more musical, and hopefully through this reading I can demonstrate what kind of I mean by that. And so just a quick background. Anja was the concertmaster of my high school's orchestra back when she was a senior and I was a junior. And in our last concert, her last concert, I remember this really well. I played the violin. I sat in the very back, but I could see her in the very front, just under this bright white light and these little motes of dust around her hair. It's very cinematic. And there was a moment just before she began Symphonie Espagnole that just a moment that I wanted to crystallize. And that's kind of how the poem begins. Sorry.
Yeah, do you want me to play a little bit of the audio, the music first?
Yes. So if you could just play the first 15 seconds to give listeners who haven't heard Symphonie Espagnole a sense of just the power of that piece.
Yeah, we'll do. Here we go. This is Symphonie Espagnole. And again, you can't hear it. And that was the first 15 or more minute or seconds of that.
Okay. Anja prepares to play Symphonie Espagnole. Shadows compass her in obeisance. Breath waits for signal. We will never be the same. We were never the same. Convergence, air, the simple chemistry of matter and attraction. Like in Mr. Murray's class, the gray-haired teacher explaining common phenomenons, how 2 decades will disappear while she stands yet, compassed in shadow, steadfast, same as ever and never again. I have known love. I have known regret. I have known reason. Yet still she stands in that ever same starlit shade of onyx, the Shawnee Mission South ensemble shifting in its skin before yielding to silence, the only herald that a fire of sound and rosin would sear us to oblivion. Nothing stays the same. Upon a lifted bow, she grins before detonation, sending us to abeyance, errant, ardent, destroying all we know again and again about the demands of hereafter. We should have relished the hot blush, the evanescence of teenage flirtation, but dumb as we were, deaf like the angels, of course we were blindsided by the unforgettable. Will we know that feeling again?
And that was Anja prepares to play Symphonie Espagnole. I also forgot to mention that we have take questions. So if anybody has any questions for Anthony, I'm happy to pass them along. But one thing I was wondering earlier as you were talking about just your history and what you've been doing is how you fell into writing poetry in the first place. You mentioned doing journalism mostly, the Olympics and things like that. But here, was this high school, I assumed?
That was high school, yes.
Yeah, so was it in high school that you were trying to distill moments in poems? Or is this like looking back later?
So that poem was looking back a little bit later, but I did start in high school. I guess as most people do, just writing in class. I remember this is just in a public school in Kansas, and I just remember enjoying it. Yeah, as most people, I also wrote prose, but I found that the pace of poetry was a little bit more suited to me. It was in college that I really began to understand, I think, that poetry could also just be pleasurable. I remember between English assignments going to the library, and I remember it very well. My first collection, my first book that I actually bought was Virginia Hamilton Adair. I think she has 3 books, but Ants on the Melon, which is how I started. It's just very simple, but that kind of put me down on this path. And I never got into, I applied, but I didn't get into the creative writing program in college. So I never had any formal study in poetry, I didn't really consider doing an MFA, going to grad school for it afterwards. It was just through observation and just doing it here and there that I picked up on more of it. I actually wish, the process of learning how to make poetry decent or passable could have been sped up quite a bit if I did have a little teaching, if I did do a class here and there. But anyway, it all has led to this, where I am now.
Kim Tedrow asks if you grew up bilingual, or is English or Chinese a first language, and how do the many differences between the two feed your work? And then as a follow-up question, do you dream in English, Chinese, or both? Right.
So Chinese was my first language, but I very much consider English my mother tongue. When you leave at 5.5, it's still, it's very early. The only the thing that I retain the best about Chinese is the ear for it. So I can actually pick up on dialects and accents where a lot of foreigners can't. But when I came back to Beijing, I had to take classes in Chinese. I had to relearn a lot of it. I had to learn how to read it. I still don't handwrite very well, but that's the case with a lot of local Chinese people as well. They've forgotten a lot of how to handwrite characters. I mostly dream in English. Although the Chinese, it's I took a couple classes in Chinese poetry, and I really loved it because a character can say so much more than a word or a letter. They're pictograms, and if you really do understand, if you understood not just the language but also the history, you can really get deep with it and fall in love with it and go down these rabbit holes, and the next thing you know, you're a penniless classical Chinese professor somewhere.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because it struck me as that the pictogrammic nature of the language makes it almost like the etymologies on the surface. Like you can look up where words came from and have that kind of layered aspect in English, but it's sort of built right into the picture, right? In Chinese poetry. So that's like another layer as you read? Is it? Is there like ways that allusions appear and things like that you couldn't possibly translate?
Yeah, absolutely. You said something in a previous episode. I don't want to misquote you, but you said how I think you were talking to Dana about this. How reading, how the reading experience for you, reading to yourself, can feel more dynamic, and I feel that's very much true for Chinese, because you have these characters that are created with other characters, these compound characters, right? To say nothing of words, which are multiple characters. But within one character, you can have three different ones, all these layers of meaning. And yet, if you read it out loud, it would just be one syllable. I'm sorry, I can't remember what your question was now.
No, well, you did a good job of. I mean, I was just talking about that, about how the history is sort of embedded in the physical language itself, which is just such an interesting thing that you can't do. And in the same way too, like in like the haiku tradition, you can't get through those books of seasons and how everything relates together unless you study it that way, And there's just layers that you can't replicate in other languages, which just seems fascinating to me.
Yeah. And, I'm not a professional, obviously I'm not a professional translator, but the task of translating Chinese poetry to me just feels like an exercise in failure, because I don't know, because you would lose so much. And for poetry, it's all about the economy of language. And yet it seems like if you were translating Chinese poetry, you'd always be tempted to make these footnotes here and there.
Yeah.
There's a book that I really want to recommend. It's called 19 Ways of Looking at Wang Wei. It's just one short poem by this classical Chinese poet named Wang Wei, but translated many different ways, 19 different ways, in fact, by different translators. And it's really interesting to see how they approach it, what words they add and which ones they take out.
Well, let's hear another poem, and then we'll do kind of a lightning round of a few questions from the audience. What do you want to read next?
Okay. So it does seem like we're a little bit behind. Let me see.
Well, if you're in no rush, we can go over. I'm not in any rush.
Okay. Well, I'll read one that has Chinese in it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So last summer, last July 2020, I took a motorbike trip with a friend, Mads Vesterager Nielsen, Danish friend, and we motorbiked from Xi'an to Dunhuang, so through the northwest province of Gansu. We began in Xi'an, and that's where I wrote this poem called "In Xi'an During Black Lives Matter Protests." The street artist might have just returned from the mountains after 5 years, survived sticking his head into the maw of inspiration, eager to share all he'd learned. Westerners only see linear, he said, Newtonian, point A to B to C. Unlike us, we are a people without creation myth or belief. Silver hair sprouted on his head, strands shocked in place by lightning, molded by wind. Eyes vulpine, waving a black brush, he preached. Of people, it is hardest to draw hands. Of trees, the willows. Of horses, their gait. Of beasts, the dog. 画人难画手，画树难画柳，画马难画走，画兽难画狗。Some dedicate their whole lives to capturing the world as it spins, retreating to higher perspectives until the horizon bends, circles form. An ocean away, Americans were fighting for equity, justice. They believed their steps led forward toward a future that could yet be determined.
Excellent. That was Xi'an during the Black Lives Matter protests. Let's ask a couple of questions sort of quick. First of all, let me find them again. So Caitlin Buxbaum wants to know about your favorite writers and Ultimate Frisbee. I don't know why Ultimate Frisbee. Are you an Ultimate Frisbee player?
I am. I suffered this calf injury last fall, and I haven't been able to play since. But yeah, Frisbee. I've played Frisbee for more than half of my life, actually, for 20 years. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, Caitlin, if you play, yeah, just I'll chat with you about it later. As far as favorite writers, I was just mentioning this to you a bit earlier that it's just really hard to get poems out here in China. I like the feel of poems. I know we can get it from, just get PDFs or whatever these days, Kindle or whatever. But I like holding a book. I like the fact that if you sit down with poems, you can be absorbed into the poet's world and the world that the poetry creates. And I think we need that. We need to disconnect sometimes. As being on a computer on devices, it's very easy to be distracted. And because of coronavirus, I haven't been able to go back to Kansas in about a year and a half due to travel restrictions and all that. So I haven't been able to replenish my poetry collection. But otherwise, what I would be buying is, well, I recently got your book. I recently purchased a couple of books from, oh shoot, this is bad. Her name is suddenly blanking. Allison, your recent guest.
Townsend?
Yes, Allison Townsend.
Yeah.
Yes. I'll be looking at Rebecca Sparks as well. But my favorite poets, probably, I would say Stephen Dunn is a favorite of mine. I've read almost all of his stuff. Stephen Dunn, Sharon Olds is another one that I really like. Linda Pastan. A lot of these poets I read so long ago. Oh shoot, I'm blanking on a name. Hoagland.
Oh
yes,
yeah.
Who wrote a beautiful essay about if why poetry can matter and all that in the Atlantic, I believe it was.
Yeah. Let's see. So Judith Wang says, or asks, where'd it go? She asks, who is your favorite trashy band? And that's another thing that I wonder if maybe is a some inside thing. Your favorite trashy band?
My favorite trashy band. There's a punk band out here called The Ravages. Try to Google that. They're cutting their first album actually. Yeah, I don't know. How do you define trashy? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. Maybe pop? I assumed, because I'm so ignorant of music, I assumed it was a genre that I wasn't familiar with, like grunge or something. So I don't know. I guess maybe like a guilty pleasure. That might be the essence of the question.
I like pop music. I don't know. We're exposed to pop music, American pop music all the time here out in the clubs and stuff. So.
So Richard Westheimer asks, do the translations of older Chinese poets, like Rex Ross translations, do them justice? It's an interesting question.
I'm not sure. When I read, I mostly read in English. I've read some Chinese poetry, especially the classics, but it's really hard to know. I think it almost becomes something entirely different. You're almost reading the translator's work instead of the original. So,
yeah.
You can find good ones.
Yeah, translation is such an interesting. Have you ever thought about translating, or?
Yeah, I've dabbled in it. It takes a lot of time, of course.
Yeah. Well, let's do a couple more poems. I think the next two you had relate. Maybe read them back to back.
Sure. Actually,
the two road trip ones, I think.
Sorry. I did. So the Xi'an one was one of them, and then the other one is the other one. You think I think they're. I think we'll probably have to skip one of these. Let's see. I'll do this one, and then maybe we can skip Veld Spoor, which is more about life for expats in Beijing. No one needs to know about that just yet. Okay, just one more from the road trip. This one is called It's a fun one. It's called All the Ways One Can Die on a Chinese Highway. In Shanxi, falling rocks. In Henan, loose cargo. In Guizhou, landslides. In Shandong, road rage. In Sichuan, villagers leave the scraps of totaled vehicles on the mountain roads as a warning. In Qinghai, the yak have right of way. In Guangdong, the night feels like a bandit. A hawker walks against traffic, pushing a cart. Dogs cross as if the road were a yard. Trucks transport soil, overloaded. Potholes, slickness, the wet. Mud roads softened by rain. Red clay. Buses in the bike lane. Tankers, walls of steel, gravel shot out of their back wheels. The hot wind, the blanket cold. On our motorbike, we read propaganda painted on the bridges, carved onto the hills. We look at scenery, at the polluted river, the shaved escarpment, the wild dips and rolls. The terraces, terraformed earth. The alien archways supporting railroads, overpasses. The dinosaurs, water buffaloes, rainbow sandstone. The ghost towns and abandoned communes. The plastic cops 3 meters tall holding signs reading slow. The bedecked Lama temple shining on a rock face. The mosque in the mist. The many temples where people ask for protection, where they pray, please, please don't let me die on the highway today.
That was All the Ways One Can Die on a Chinese highway. People are asking on both. They're saying don't skip poems. They want more poems. Do you want to just get through? I don't know how much time you have. Do you want to get through the last two?
So I have plenty of time. I know people are probably waiting for the open mic, but sure, I would be happy to.
Okay, let's just.
So real quick. Okay.
Yeah.
So this one, just really quick, I'll intro it. A few weeks ago, after a show, I was standing outside with Liane, and she's from South Africa, and she's the South African in this poem. But she said that she sees Beijing as basically a concrete jungle. I'm paraphrasing her, and it reminds her in some ways, in a very different way, of South Africa and of specifically the Veld, which is the grasslands of South Africa. And she gave me this other word, spoor, S-P-O-O-R, which means in verb form it means to track the scent of animals. Spoor, animals, spoor, prey. So this one is called Veld Spoor. Night falls on the Beijing Veld, cover thrown atop concrete and glass. Watch the humans creep, puff out their chests like oryx and gemsbok, slink to their watering holes, turn peroxysmal and spore what they desire, eyes flashing cheetah green, lioness yellow. Here in the Beijing habitat, the treeless plateau, we are purblind with drought-resistant livers, romping on sweet and sour Veld, dreaming of succulents and jackalberry, giraffe heads above acacia, waterbuck in stot. In our fuddle, we confuse alcohol for nectar and drums for thunder, throw up our arms to receive what we believe is benediction. Let me show you what it's like in my home country, the musician from South Africa says, and strums 2 chords, Veld, Spoor. And there appears the leopard and montane scrub, the caracal in thornbush with tufted ears waiting for who knows what, vulture or good luck. Look at the spying monkeys in the leaves, the wildebeest rearranging dirt beneath its feet, those mongoose starting in for a steal. Suddenly, the night sky opens, and down pours light in a hail of heat and rain, summer storm of phosphine and octane. All things become noctilucent. On the dance floor, we see through each other to the thorny aloes of our nerves, ashamed by all that we wanted. We are prospecting through God's window, the impala and baobabs, horns and hands held by weeping love grass. Our deflagrating lust turns meager, then dust.
That was Veld, Spoor. People are mentioning that they learn words every poem. Do you do a lot of research for your poems? It's something that maybe strikes me as something you might be doing, is reading a lot before you write.
Yes, so that one I did have to do a lot of research about the South African Veld. I think everyone probably does, right?
Well, I don't know about that, actually. Everyone would be better off if they did, maybe.
It's funny. Because on the road trip that I took, the motorbike trip, I had the experience of returning to writing by hand. I had a journal, and I really liked that experience. I think it's very different when you write by hand. Somehow, I think you tap into a part of yourself that's below the neck, if that makes sense. Whereas if you are in front of your computer, you're always tempted to, for instance, Google or pull up your favorite dictionary app, and then it becomes a different kind of exercise. But anyway, the best poems, of course, are the ones that you write from sentiment or from what you feel. If you can tap deep, and then you set it aside and you go back and edit with your editor's cap on, and all the tools of technology at your disposal.
Well, do you want to finish out with growing up with Beijing?
Sure. Last poem, Growing Up with Beijing. This one, it's got a quote at the start from Mao, and it reads, "Dig tunnels deep, store grain everywhere, and never seek hegemony." So let me just tell you. So I found that quote in an underground tunnel in Beijing, and wow. These tunnels were built in the '60s during the height of tensions with the USSR. The threat of nuclear war actually was very real, and Mao basically commanded people to start digging. And in fact, a lot of the tunnels built underground, which very few of them still exist. A lot of them are sealed up, but a lot of them were just built underneath apartment buildings and such. That's where people can access them anyway. They were meant to be underground bunkers in case of nuclear war. A lot of the city wall. So Beijing had a majestic city wall that was all torn down. And a lot of those stones from the walls were actually used on the tunnels. Anyway, growing up with Beijing. Our families lived in the shadow of nuclear obliteration. They dug because Mao decreed it. Deeper, harder, before engineers installed airlocks and filters. We lived longhand, planting today what keeps the idea of being alive, like saving the fat off meat to fry cabbage, then scraping woks to extract seasoning for family stews. The cities we built calloused our hands and slept in our feet. Wondrous labyrinths glowing in tunnels and dank promises, proud if only to know what your pride is worth. You need another language to describe what we cherished, fought and died for, and killed for, waiting in the off hours on dusty curbs for green buses in grit-colored overalls, or pedaling down the avenue of eternal peace, glancing at our Savior, thinking we believed. We were too humble to say it out loud, so we learned how to toast, how to walk under fog cover, how to swallow trauma and store it in the basement of tomorrow, even if by tomorrow they'd be flooded and sealed up like old grudges. When we realized God, Mao, could die, we performed duty and ablution, looked at our city permanently reconstructed, and did not cry. Our childhoods would live on in street signs, our trees memorialized by restaurants, the old city gates arrogant and noble, now traffic circles and overpasses. First, let a few grow rich, the new leader said, and then let the trees and memories of persimmons and birds under the eaves return, he applied. Those days before envy, but always forward. No questions of cost, what desecration can buy, how much our identities were written on old walls. We became distracted by skyscrapers, malls, McDonald's. It was no time to let silences speak, lecture us about price. We all paid. We knew then what none do now. Only we can obliterate what is ours. Our children never have to know the games we played, what majesties we knew, and hopes were harbored.
I was growing up with Beijing, probably my favorite poem in this collection that you sent us. So I'm so glad you could read it. Thanks for going over time a little bit to do so.
Oh, thank you.
Just to pass this along, but Cindy Botha here over on YouTube says she's from South Africa, and the Veld poem really rings true, and she feels like it was very authentic. So,
thank you, Cindy. Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that you worry about or not, but it's always nice to get it right.
Yeah, I worry about it all the time, especially at that journalist training.
Yeah.
Very sure.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for being a guest today. It's been a really pleasure to talk to you. I hope you can be on again sometime, and really, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. It was all mine.
Yeah, well, have a good night, Anthony.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, so there's Anthony Tao, and you can find Anthony at his website, which is Anthony Tao, AnthonyTao.com. Also, find that Poetry X Music YouTube channel. Subscribe there and watch and like those videos. There's another one that just came up that was just released maybe a week ago. Another section from the Coronavirus in China poem. Just a wonderful, that one, a cartoon animated version of one of those sections. Just really wonderful. So I hope you can follow Anthony all the places he goes, and check out SupChina too, which is a really fascinating reading. I got immersed in that a little bit last night. Now is the time for the open lines, and this is how it works. If you haven't yet, email the poem to openmic@rattle.com. That's openmic@rattle.com right now. So I have it. I can show it on screen. You can send a poem in a file. You can send a link if something's published online, and I can just show it that way. But it's nice to show it like we were with Anthony when you read the poem. So please do send it if you can ahead of time. And they can be any poem you want to share. There is a prompt. This week's prompt was to write a homophone poem. So there's homophones are words that sound the same but are spelled differently and are different words. So that was the prompt. And so if you have poems for the prompt, please share them now. Email them over to openmic@rattle.com. But share anything you'd like. We'd love to hear from you. And once again, email it to openmic@rattle.com. And then what you do is you call me at 818-850-7727. That's the phone number if you'd like to do the phone. Voice only. Just let it ring a few times, then hang up. I will call you back when it's your turn. If you'd like to do it over Skype, just send me a chat message like a whole bunch of people already have to Rattle Poetry. That's Rattle Poetry, all one word. Just send a chat message, say hi. I'll wave back, and then I'll call you up when it's your turn. We'll make sure we get to every first-time caller. No matter what, and we'll get to as many people as we can for the next hour or so, or 50 minutes maybe. Now, next week's guest in the Rattlecast, as I stand up and stretch a little bit, next week's guest is going to be... I mentioned, said maybe we'd play the other poem of Anthony's. If we have time in the open mic, I'll play that later. But right now I'm just going to get things set up and take a quick little break and show you that next week's guest is going to be Wendy Vidalock. Her newest book is Slingshots and Love Plums, and she's one of my favorite poets. I love her work. She's been in Rattle a whole bunch of times, most recently in Poet Response just a few months ago. She's a poet from Colorado, and one of the most unique poets really writing today. Love Wendy Vidalock. Never met her. Looking forward to that. That is next Tuesday, March 16th. The regular time, 9 p.m. Eastern, Rattlecast number 84 with Wendy Vidalock. Now I'm just going to take a 30-second break, stand up and stretch. I will be right back. And I'm back. Thanks so much for your patience. I just don't like to sit for too long, and I have to get logged into all the right stuff. Now, as I mentioned, let's see, who is on the call list? We have Terry Ofner is here. Good. I'll definitely call you, Terry. We didn't get to you last week, which is, so we'll definitely want to get to you today. Nivedita Karthik is here. Richard Westheimer. Brent. We have a 917. We have Caitlin Buxbaum, James Gaynor, Brenda Kamarinsky so far. So if you'd like to join us, once again, the numbers are on the screen. I won't say them again. But call me up there if you would like to join in. And it's Rattle Poetry over Skype. Someone's calling right now. That's a 614 number. So that's a new one. We'll definitely get to that. Now, as I mentioned, the prompt this week was here. Let me put it on screen. Homophones are pairs of words which are pronounced the same way, but have different meanings, such as ball and ball. That's B-A-L-L and B-A-W-L. Write a poem that contains at least one pair of homophones. And I'm still trying to write, because I love these super short, like micro poems, like Wendy Vitalock does, and like Mike White does. I just love them, and I can't ever write them. So for long, I've been trying to get some that work. Here's another attempt at a super short poem. Playing with homophones. This is Homophonic, my poem for the week. Very short, and at least they're short. That's what Robert Pinsky always says about his translations of the Iliad. At least they're short. Here is my homophonic. The arc of the ants in the arc of your pants, no longer on sale as they sailed through the room, was like a dance, though not tied to the tide, whether the weather was mist or monsoon. So I don't know if that even, I might have to read that twice to even get that. It's so condensed, but I don't know if it worked. Still, I'm trying to work on this form. And Megan's, I have last week's poem too, which I didn't get to finish or read, but maybe I'll do that if we have time. We probably won't, but maybe another day I'll do the four elements poem. This was Megan's poem for the homophones prompt, and see if you can find the homophone here. It's kind of hidden, but it's definitely there. Bazooka. This is my bazooka, my young son said, and picked up a stick in our front yard, vaguely gun-shaped, twig as trigger, and I wonder where he heard that word, but I also couldn't help saying it out loud. Bazooka, bazooka, one of those words that begged to be said, a bullet-sized song. And then I Googled it on my phone while my son hefted his weapon and aimed it at the sun. And I read that the anti-tank rocket launcher was named after the comedian-invented musical instrument, which the weapon happened to resemble. Which makes sense because they both look ridiculous, and they both sound ridiculous. But we can't help repeating that word, my son and I, bazooka, in giggly chorus, blending together, lilting and howling, a war chant, something close to music. That was Megan's poem, Bazooka. And unlike Megan, I know where that bazooka came from. It came from, we went on a hike and found it in the wash, in the escarpment, where the mountain is sliding down into the desert. Now let's see what you have for us. Let's do Terry Ofner first, because I read his poem last week, but we didn't actually get to see him. So let's call up Terry and see what Terry has for us. Hey, Terry, how you doing tonight?
Good.
I don't have video. I don't know if you want to appear. If you do, click the camera button. Here you come. Oh, and let me pull you into Terry. Hey, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. A first time appearance, even though we read your a really great poem last week.
Hold on here.
Oh, are you getting two of me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, just click out or mute the other one. I can't hear it. It's not coming up in your microphone, but...
Okay.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So where are you calling from, Terry?
Indianapolis.
And what do you have for us today?
My father's garden.
Is there anything you want to say about it, or just dive right in?
It was, I apologize for the length. It's a little long.
I'm sure it's going to be good, though. I'm looking forward to it.
And I wrote to the homophone, which is not usually my way of writing to an end.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like to write to what I don't know what I'm writing to,
Yeah.
So it took a couple of tries.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. Why don't you go ahead?
My father's garden. The yard belonged to my mother. She envisioned the bones of the gardens, the placement of the pond and of the willow, which in time would strum the water's surface with its weeping branches like languorous fingers. She laid out the sweeping curves of the flower beds with a hose, cut out the sod. She planted the tall viburnums and lilacs as definition and backdrop for the lilies, daisies, and those irises with the purple slipper-like flowers. She planted the apple and the cherry, the grapes and the asparagus, left the mulberry for the birds, and she saved the back corner by the chicken house for my father. He had plans of his own, plans that for the most part involved straight lines and terracotta walkways. There was no competition between them. Said another way, there really was no contest. My father first tried to raise different species of turf grass in separate squares, Kentucky blue, fescues, and bent grass, the kind they use on putting greens. Those grasses did not cooperate. One of them, I believe it was the red fescue, took over until all the squares looked the same. My father despaired in his good-natured way, shook his head in mock disgust, smiled. He was retired, and he needed something to do with his hands while he listened to baseball on his transistor radio. Meanwhile, my mother's gardens thrived. Her main task was keeping the grass out of her beds. Otherwise, she divided mums, filled in bare places, gave the extras away, dug in bulbs for spring color. In time, my father settled on an herb garden. He put in a sundial and planted various varieties of thyme around it, a gardener's pond. The willow has long since died, but the pond and my mother's beds remain. My father's patches of grass get mowed along with the rest of the yard. The sundial stands alone, its gnomon tracing the hours and minutes in the sun.
Oh, I love that, especially the ending. Thanks so much. That was My Father's Garden. Thanks so much for calling in and sharing that, Terry.
You bet.
Yep, have a good night.
You too.
Yeah, that was My Father's Garden by Terry Ofner. I see Victoria Garton, Brendan Tricarico. Oh, definitely have to get to, Brenda Tricarico. Definitely have to get to Brenda as a first-time caller. Let me do let's do the other first-time caller numbers here. This is a 917. We'll do 917, then we will do 614. Then we have a Judith. Judith Wang. Oh, there you go. Yeah, great to see you here, Judith. I saw Judith in the chat a bunch of times. And then Brenda Tricarico. So we'll do those three at least, then we'll get to the rest of all you lovely regulars, Richard Westheimer, Nivdita, etc. Let's call up 917 and see who that is. So the phone is ringing. Hey, this is Tim with Rattle. Do you hear me?
Hello?
Hello. Did you want to share a poem? You're live on the air.
Yes, I would like to.
And who am I talking to?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Who am I talking to?
Oh, my name is Florence Casson Mayers.
Ah, great. I see your poem right here. Yeah.
Okay. I write sestinas. This is a homophonic sestina.
Excellent. Well, I love the looks of this already. So why don't you go ahead and read it?
Okay. Apology. I don't mean to be mean when I say what I mean. What I mean is, I don't mean to offend. Don't mean my words to demean. Am I mean? If you think I'm mean, you don't get what I mean. Uh-oh, this is what you mean. Even though I don't mean to be mean, something mean sneaked in. I see what you mean. If what I say seems mean, tell me. I mean to be kind. I mean well. I mean no harm. I mean to help. I mean to help you say what you mean. I mean it. What I mean is, there's no mean streak, not one mean bone. Didn't mean to make you cry. Didn't mean to rush you out the door. Didn't mean to chase you away. I mean what I say. What I mean to say is, say exactly what you mean. Say no words that mean little. I know you mean to be poetic. What does it mean to be poetic? What do you mean? What do I mean? I mean to praise. I never mean to be mean. I never meant my mean to be mean.
Oh, that was excellent. I love the way that turns over and over on itself. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you, Tim. I'm glad to do it.
Yeah. I hope you call in again soon.
I will.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Good night.
Oops. So, I forgot to save the name. That was Florence Mayers with Apologies. Or just Apology. Thanks so much, Florence, for sharing that. Let me make sure I put you in our phone book so I know who it's calling next time. Abigail Weathers is here too. We have a whole bunch of new callers. Let's do the 614. See who that is. And this is international. Oh, so it's a country code 6. Let's see if it works. I think it's not working. I turned on international calling. Yeah, so that didn't work. Whoever's at the I think it's a country code 6, which could be China. I'm not sure. Whoever that is, maybe try calling again. I'll try to catch you, or try Skype. I'll try it again, but and it seemed to just get a busy signal when I called, so I'm not sure what that was. Let me do. Let's go to. Oh, that was Judith. Okay, let's do Judith over Skype then. That's much better. Hey, Judith, are you there? Judith, oh, here you come. Oh, I can't hear you though. I see you, but the microphone's not picking up. Yeah, we don't have any sound. So if you go, let's see. If you go to the settings, I'll try to call you back in just a couple minutes. Go to the settings and make sure your microphone is turned to the right microphone in Skype, and then I'll call you back.
Okay.
There it goes. You're
you
here. Yeah, you popped back. Okay.
Yeah. So the 6-1 number was actually me.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, yeah, so glad you could join us. Yeah, we see and hear you perfectly. So are you in China?
Okay, great.
I see the sun.
Why are there two of you who are disagreeing with each other?
Oh, I think you might have the stream open, so close your where you're watching on YouTube or wherever. X out of that, so it's just just Skype.
Okay, yeah, I'm not on the stream anymore. It's just Skype. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we
Because I was
good now?
confused. I heard two of you.
Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. So where are you
Do you
calling
have my
from?
poem?
I'm
I'm calling from Australia.
Oh, you're from Australia. Excellent. And let me.
Yeah, I'm originally from Singapore, but I actually know all the spittoon people from China because I was there when the entire thing started. Yeah.
Oh, great. And so you have ants for us.
Yeah. Yes, I do. Should I? So I have it up on the screen, and I can read it.
Yeah, you'll have to
Just
pull.
tell me whenever.
Yeah, I'll put it up for everybody at home. You have to read your own copy. I can't put it on the screen for you.
Yeah, I'll read my copy.
Yeah.
Sure, no
Yeah.
worries.
Okay, let me just put it in a document so we don't give everybody your email address. Here we go. Okay. So this is ants. And is there anything you want to say about it before you read?
Am I on the air now?
Yeah. Oh, you're live on the air. Yeah.
Oh, I've been live already. Okay,
You have.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, hello, spittoon people. I miss you. I'm in Australia, and Ants is actually written about Singapore. I wrote it like when I arrived back in Singapore, which is my hometown, after I'd been in China. So that's the background for it. And the ants are, I guess, a conceit.
Excellent.
And there's definitely homophonic stuff going on in there with the word ants.
Well, that is perfect. Yeah. Well, let's hear it. Go ahead
Yeah,
whenever
I hope
you're
so.
ready.
Okay. All right, here we go. Ants by Judith Wang. The first thing you notice about this place is the ants. Ants on the walls, ants on the floor, ants on the ceiling, between the cracks, between the lights. Ants in the kitchen, ants in the dining room, ants in the living room, ants in the bedroom. Ants on the flowers you pick, ants on the cup you put down, ants on the soles of your slippers, ants on the seat of your chair, ants on your arm when you lean against a tree. Ants, reddish brown, tiny as a full stop with tinier feelers. Ants in a line, bringing reinforcements. Ants mooling around a puddle, feeling it out, and then winding around it. Ants, 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 the ever-present soldiers of rot, of decay, of furore, of the ever-looming, ever-present near ubiquity of death. The death of an evening, the death of a week, the death of a year of Mondays through Sundays, the death of you, the death of me, the death of the forest, the death of the city. Ants, heading a pity party, daisy chain, hailing the fact that everything's rotting, quickly, so quickly, in the fulsome decay of the tropical sun. Bury your grandma, and within a minute you can be sure she's a feast. She's a feast. A feast of her eyes, her ears, her nose, her hair. Ants at her neck, ants at her throat, ants on her tongue, ants in her vagina, ants knocking at the unlockable door of her teeth. Nothing stays, not the condos, not the semi-Ds, not the bungalows, not the HDBs. Everything is one fecund, rotting, shifting, collapsing thing. Ants move in and build a nest. They knock down and they build up. They are building museums one day and catacombs the next. They are building MRT lines, they are building libraries, skyscrapers, they are building roads that lead nowhere and everywhere at once. They are building shopping mall after shopping mall. They are building hipster coffee shops, they are building sky gardens, they are building infinity pools, they are building Lego sets, they are building simulated high-tech breakneck metropolises, they are building high-end luxury villas for the billionaires of the world to unite in the carefully constructed tax havens of the cove. Ants, everywhere ants. They are tearing them down. They are going to town. They are knocking down schools. They are tunneling through libraries. They are demolishing skyscrapers to make room for even higher towers of glass, bridged by bridges of glass. They are unearthing your ancestors to build high-rises on the wounded, exhumed lands of the dead. O restless land, heaving with the absolute biomass of ants, 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 building your carefully commissioned babies, new cribs in the sky, building a sky-high fantasy eye to eye your sky as it wheels by. Ants eating away at the prophecy of the old man, tearing away at his legacy to make it even more perfect, more cunning, more insidious than ever before. Ants working to put together the labels on museums, the programs for concert pianists, how it would be legato in this era and staccato the next, determining which species of trees will grow on the sides of the roads in robust and cacophonous harmony. Ants, laboring to the rhythm of the silent obese queen, issuing orders through pneumatic pipelines. Ants on my bed feeding the gifted with royal jelly, keeping the drones in their amniotic sacs even as poets emerge in full chorus on cue in your third generation. Ah, ants, you have crawled over my crevices, you have exhumed my graves, you have stalked up my banana ghosts, wafting like frangipani hosts in the middle of a wet petal. Every damn where, ants, what have you done with my grandma? All you've left of her sweet old face is brittle bone, the hole where her nose used to be, the hole where her lips used to be, the hole where the head of my father first emerged into this world, obliterating all love of and knowledge of history with the hard, forgetting light of life. Ah yes, ants, tap dancing on the way to infinity on a closed loop with no possible feedback. Ants in the musical of the life of our founder, the founder of the colony, the founder of the party, the founder of every last drip and drop of our nether end. Ants, saying nothing original, only a soup of letters to feed us pap to the embryos that hatch every year into batches of preconceived dots joined to jots, joined to dots, that are our offspring, that are our past and our present and our future, a blank after blank of ants after ants after ants. Our doyens of recycling, multitude of multitudes, ants from end to end to end, beginning at the very moment of the end, poised on the cusp of every last future, zigzagging around this and then that corner of the world, sending scouts out and then flooding in armadas of puny, tiny, heavy-lifting champions. Ah, yes, we are ants flying in pairs on the wings of love to an inevitable descent by the moon of the fluorescent light, waiting for a chance to replenish the genetic stock of the colony. We are ants, sniffing out the trail of opportunity, the chemical trail left by ants of yore. We are ants, never resting, never sleeping, questing continually on our equatorial island for the very edges of time, stretching its form to the limits of regularity, building to the very edge of space. And when we have flown beyond our inevitable tower, a satellite fixing its gaze upon the pinpoint of our origin, may we look back and gasp and see on the swarming dot of our land the heaving mass of ants, ants, ants.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. That was a lot of fun. That was Ants. That was it. Yeah, Ants by Judith Wang. Thanks so much for joining us from Australia, Judith. Always a pleasure, and hope you can call in again soon.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yep, bye. Yeah, that was Judith Wang. You can find her at Judith, Judith, Huang, HUANG.com. Let us see who is next. We have Abigail Weathers and Brenda Trickerico. So we'll do Brenda first, then Abigail, then maybe drop down to Caitlin. We haven't seen Caitlin in a while, but let's do Brenda next. Hey, Brenda, you're live on the air. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm trying to find you.
There
I am. Okay. Hi.
Yeah, here we come. Hello. Did you email me a poem?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let me try
Brenda
to.
Morissey, though.
Okay, let me. Let's see. Are you Brenda Komarinsky?
Nope.
Oh no, Brenda Trick. I have Brenda Komarinsky's poem. You open it. You sent it to maybe.
Trick.
What is it?
Trick is the female.
Oh, okay. Let me see. More trick. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of.
I just sent it on.
Oh, just like momentarily ago.
Yeah.
It's not coming up for me, and it's not. Let's see, spam. Did not go to spam. No spam here. And what is the email? Or the
Moritric.
MORITRIC. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I don't have it. Do you want to just read it?
Okay.
Or do you want me to call you back in a couple minutes?
Where would it be?
I don't know.
I'm
Maybe.
so confused.
Yeah, it should be here. Let's see. It's not on my regular email account either, which some people send to the wrong one. But no, it's...
Okay, so can I just read it?
Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and read it? Yeah.
Okay, this is called Postcards and Place Between the Two. Dearest S, even though you're attracted to bridges and I prefer the ferry, I posted my movie star cleavage when you promised to love a good love story. But exposure and contrast are more than just props, and your plot is on Staten Island, and my novel is in the Bronx. So it's just a buzzing for company. I throw my voice at the horizon. Dear B, only sirens push through the stone of pandemic. So memorize me if I don't turn up. How was I supposed to know that to the racket of echoes, I was a broken window? Dear S, have I told you I sleep alone to dodge nosy mind readers? Will my transparency bore you? Or will you nag me with what's wrong until I shrug? Who should know better than you? P.S. I've been warned that my fickle soul will never settle on a mate, that she's saving herself for the night she would leave my body. Dear B, the sky takes a breath in mid-sentence as the tired moon rests in the hand of a cloud. I take the temperature of the empty street and dip my fingers into disinfectant. Where are you? Dear S, my last romance died on the telephone, but that's not the reason I won't answer. Will our consonants electrocute us? Will our moans bleed out, drawn into the limp hum of strangers? Dear B, I still water Mama and the travelers. Their good intentions keep me up. How was I supposed to know if I threw stones at the dead, their markers would grow into monuments? It's true that my altar looks like a cemetery, headshots of loved ones and their buried regret. When we meet, I'll be the one with fake dahlias glued to my mask. P.S. The decomposition of grief hardly stinks at all. Dear P.S. hardly stinks. Don't stalk TikToks from way back and past that. Don't stack the clock against me and shift from now to then. Don't hoard time crumbs and drop them in my lap. Wait for me to wind back up. Dear, wind me up. I marvel when I close my eyes and poof, the darkness brightens according to the lid tight of my shut eye. When I let go of my time props, will I fly? Dear, fly to me. Yes, but always carry a spare set of wings for just in case. In the meantime, practice breathing on tiptoe, thaw the stick of your neck, and calm this hell-raising sickness. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was Brendan Tricarico and
Morissey. Brenda Morissey.
Oh, Brenda Morissey. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Brenda Morissey. And what was the name of that poem again?
Postcards in Place Between the Two.
Postcards in Place. Yeah, I loved it. Great reading, too. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep. Good night. Bye. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Next up, let's do... let's call Abigail Weathers. We also have Victoria Garton. Let's see. Trying to make sure we get to all the first-time callers. I don't think we've talked to Abigail Weathers before. Let me see in a second. We'll see. Abigail, hello.
Hey. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. You were live. Let me just fix your camera. There we go.
Okay.
So you're live on the air.
Poem.
Yeah. So where are you calling from?
Awesome. I'm calling from Beijing.
Oh, great. Are you part of the Spittoon group too?
I am. So I know Anthony very well. So I was very happy to catch this interview with him.
Very great. And what do you have to share with us tonight 1 a.m. I see.
I have a poem called, yes, 1 a.m. And just very brief. So I'm a part of the Spittoon Collective, and I actually co-run our poetry workshop. So I was supposed to be working on a poem for that to present there, but then some other circumstances outside my house diverted my attention. So that's kind of what this poem is about.
Okay, very
So
cool.
this is 1 a.m. Some poor soul outside is coming to grips with time and space. Ayo. Suddenly, the night's no longer peripheral, as up and down the slumbering street, a slow motion ricochet stumbles majestically off-beat. Or anti-beat, really, the long pause, and a drunk's sforzando existentially percuss on randomized loops. Were he here with us, Mr. Cage might well be inspired to take pen to page and write nothing at all. Genius is rarely understood, and here my midnight companion waltzes before the rest to the lonely hour, waltzes and makes the practiced appear spontaneous, with smooth steps and lithe transitions, ostensibly gained from years of dearly bought lessons. Waltzes on at last, as even drunks have schedules to keep, and we, momentary three, disintegrate, the audience, the drunk, and the slumbering street.
Excellent poem. Love the internal rhymes there and
you.
stuff. It's definitely a great, obviously a great group that goes on at the Spittoon there. Thanks so much. I'm so glad we can get a few people
Thank you
to
so much.
join us. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
Yeah, there was Abigail Weathers from Beijing as well. Now let's call up. We talked to Florence. We talked to Terry. Let's do. Oh, James Gaynor wanted to read a Tony Hoagland poem. Let's do that. I always do like to have other poems, favorite poems as well as poems you wrote yourself for these open lines.
Hello.
Hey, James, how you doing tonight? You're live on the air.
Oh, Tim, hi.
Yeah.
Well, I have a poem I would like to share.
Yeah, sure.
By Tony Hoagland, and I was very touched. Anthony Tao mentioned him in your interview.
Yeah, he was just an amazing poet and died so suddenly and so unexpectedly, really, I guess. I mean, everybody I know was shocked. Didn't even know he was sick, and then, yeah.
I actually, one of the reasons I'm reading it is that it's sort of in his honor. He was very, very kind to me. And I have a great story about him I'll share with you at some point. But this is called Fetch by Tony Hoagland, and ever since I've read it, I've kept it up on my laptop desktop.
Okay, great. Yeah, go ahead. I have it up for everybody, so go ahead and read it whenever you're ready.
Okay. Who knew that the sweetest pleasure of my 58th year would turn out to be my friendship with the dog? That his trembling, bow-legged bliss at seeing me stand there with the leash would give me a feeling I had sought throughout my life. Now I understand those old ladies walking their chihuahuas in the dusk, plastic bag wrapped around one hand, content with a companionship that, whatever else you think of it, is totally reliable. And in the evening at cocktail hour, I think tenderly of them in all those apartments on the 14th floor, holding out a little hot dog on a toothpick to bestow a luxury on a friend who knows more about the uncomplicated pleasure than any famous lobbyist for the mortal condition. These barricades and bulwarks against human loneliness, they used to fill me with disdain. But that was before I found out my metaphysical needs could so easily be met by the wet gaze of a brown and white retriever with a slight infection of the outer ear and a tail like a windshield wiper. I did not guess that love would be returned to me as simply as a stick returned when it was thrown again and again and again. In fact, I still don't exactly comprehend. What could that possibly have to teach me about being human?
Excellent. That was James Gaynor reading Tony Hoagland's poem Fetch, a quintessential Tony Hoagland poem. What is it specifically about that poem that you love so much, James?
I live with a dog who came to sort of adopted me. She's a sort of combination Shih Tzu and wolf in her own mind, and she's named Emily Dickinson.
Oh, that's funny.
And Tony Hoagland is just, he's a poet who has spoken to me in so many different poems and his essays, and he was, as I said, he was very kind to me personally, so I wanted to read this in his honor.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, James. I'm so glad you did.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Yep. Good night.
Good night.
That was James Gaynor. And Caitlin Buxbaum. Let's call Caitlin. Has to leave in 5 minutes or so. She hasn't been on in a while. Let's call up Caitlin. We have like 10 or 15 minutes left. Let's see. Here she is.
Oh.
Hey, Caitlin. How you doing tonight?
Good. I'm on my phone again, so I'm trying to remember how to do all the things. Okay.
Oh, you're coming in. There you
Now
are. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Great interview. Great people. I've already connected with a few from the chat, so hooray for that.
Yeah, that's always great. That's always a highlight. You know what we hope to have happen with these kind of episodes. Let me find your poem. Where is it? There it is. So anything you want to say about you sent the elemental one, right?
Yeah, so I actually did end up writing a homophone one, but it was really bad. It was on a day where I was just like, nothing was coming to me. But I liked this poem, and I didn't get to read it last week because I was at work, since the Rattlecast was earlier.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I forgot about that. And I was just like, oh, dang it. So, yeah, probably no one will know what this is about. But that's okay. They can think whatever they want to think.
Great. Well, let's hear it. This is Elemental, Caitlin M.S. Buxbaum.
Okay. Elemental. We are the earth, each of us a continent, adrift, on a journey to find fresh water, quench the parched terrain of our throats and minds. Drink up the sight of us, flowing through this artery into the open ocean of unexpected, for a breath of the precious outside air, riddled with snow, and now laughter. Watch us pause, find our footing where other feet have tread, but not with such explicit purpose, and return to the dull fluorescence from whence we came. Learn from these flushed cheeks and fingers on fire from the cold, which maybe makes us more receptive to this warmth, more grateful for these walls, more a part of each other's earth.
Excellent. I love the atmospheric mood of that, even though I don't know what it's about either. But yeah, thanks for that. And I love the way too the elements like pull through with sort of really good lines in the poem. It worked out really well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Bye. Yes, that was Caitlin Buxbaum with Elemental. We're running up on time, but let me see. We had Abigail. We probably have time for 2 more people. Let's see. We did 23rd. I'm trying to see who we haven't had in the most recent episodes. Richard, we had Sunday. Okay, let's call up, if we have time, we'll do Richard. Let's see if Brent, I don't know if Brent was on last week. Let's do Brent. Yeah, so what we'll do is Brenda Komarinsky. She hasn't been on. Okay, so this is what we'll do. Sorry, everybody. Just got to figure out what we have time for. We'll do Victoria Garton and then Brenda Komarinsky, both of whom haven't been on in a while. So let's call it Victoria right now.
Hello.
Hello, Victoria. You're live on the air. Do you have a poem for us?
Yes, I have a poem called Homophones, a lesson plan that I've sent to you.
Excellent. Yeah, I have it right here. Do you want to introduce it at all, or do you just want to dive right in?
Okay, I'll introduce it a little bit. Let me put this over here. I don't know if you can pick me up or not.
Yeah, you sound a little far away now, and I have the volume.
This is a lesson plan
there you go. Okay.
that I've taught. So it's called Homophones that I've taught at a community college here in Southwest Missouri. Homophones, a lesson plan. There. Where? There. Adverb. You're late. Sit here. Hear about homophones. Bottles on desk. Students at desk. Their bottles. Their desk. Possessive. EIR. Got it? Their bottles. Contradictions. Contractions are a privilege. They hurry speech. 2 words or more as one. A little statement. They are. There. Don't tell where. Or who owns what. Use it for those, you lose it for this semester. See yourself at the pool hall. Hiram says rack 'em up. You reply, they are ready for play. At the roadhouse, drinks all around. You reply, they are coming. Take 13 curves to the badass ball. No one will bawl at mangled homophones. Bare your ass at the strip pits party. Bear coming out of the woods won't ID as homophones. Some places nobody cares, but here in this classroom, there has a cousin where. There has to have something or someone that belongs to them, and there is always 2 words, they and are.
Excellent lesson. Thanks so much.
Homophones.
Yeah,
a
thanks so
lesson
much.
plan.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that was a great lesson and very useful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Victoria. Good night. Let's see. So last caller, because we are up at 8 o'clock. The last caller, who did I say it was going to be? I said it would be... who did I say it was going to be? Oh, Brenda Kamarinsky. Yeah, we haven't had Brenda in a month. That was right. Let's see what Brenda has for us to close us out. Oh, and okay. Hey, Brenda, how you doing tonight?
Good. Very good. So, I have my little poem here. It's a short one. Just real quick of how it came to be. I usually, for the Poets Respond on Sunday, I listen in my car.
Mm-hmm.
And so a few weeks ago, we had Clemence Hurd had his lovely Stresses Live in Texas poem.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening to you, and you gave his website, and you very nicely spelled out Clemence, but then you said, and Hurd is just like Hurd. And
that's right. There are multiple Hurds. I didn't think of that.
Well, there's Hurd and there's Hurd.
You're right.
So, and then this prompt comes up, and I'm like, oh, and well, when you can do Hurd, you got to do herd immunity, and the poem kind of writes itself.
Excellent. Well, let's hear it.
So it's called Pandemic Ending. Hey, have you heard? We are all one big herd. We're sheep, hard of hearing here. It's not just me hopped up on hope. I'll see you at the sea when we get our immunity.
Oh, that was excellent. I love little poems. Thanks so much for sharing that, Brenda.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inspiring it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And Clemence is Hurd, H-E-A-R-D. There's a
Yeah.
the A in there.
Yes, I did look it up afterwards.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much, Brenda.
Thanks.
Yep, good night.
Good night.
Okay, unfortunately, that has to be all for the show tonight. Thanks, everybody who joined in, as always. If you had a poem that you had ready to go this week, feel free to share it next week. We're really loose on these open lines. So if you want to save it for next week, feel free to call in next week. We do have to get going. Now, next week's guest on the Rattlecast, like I said, is going to be Wendy Vitalock. Oh, but before I do that, of course, hang on a second. Before I do that, I have to tell you the prompt. The prompt is a short one next week. The prompt for next week is right here. Oops, right here. Give your poem a utopian or dystopian setting. So write a utopian or dystopian setting. That is your prompt for next week. Pretty short one-liner prompt. Write a utopian or a dystopian poem. And that's next week's prompt, always chosen by Megan, or invented by Megan. And I will write a poem. Megan will write a poem. You will write a poem, hopefully, because that's what makes this a whole lot of fun. And we'll be having an episode with Wendy Vitalock next Tuesday, March 16th. As I mentioned, Wendy Vitalock is the author of a whole bunch of poems. A whole bunch of books. Her most recent is Slingshots and Love Plums. She also has Nevertheless Hello and the new one, I can't remember. GNU. I can't remember the whole title of that one. But Wendy Vitalock's one of my favorite poets. We've published her a whole bunch of times. She writes, as you know, look through Rattle. She writes short, mostly very rhyming and rhythmic poems. She also does her own artwork. So this is watercolor paintings that are cover. Wendy Vitalock, a very interesting person. Really excited for this episode. Rattlecast number 84, Tuesday, March 16th, 9 p.m. Eastern, like always. Hope to see you then, and hope you have a good night. Good night.